Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Marc Beginin, founder and CEO of Prodigy Processing Solutions. Thank you very much for joining me today, Marc.
Hey, thank you for having me, David. Appreciate you.
No, really appreciate you coming on. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Marc, I always like to start the podcast with a little bit of background. So how was it that you got involved with the cannabis industry?
All right, I'll try to put it in a bit of a nutshell here. I've been a practicing attorney since about 2003 in Michigan. 2008, Michigan went medically legal, and it was a really big deal, and that was by a public referendum. And there was lots of opportunities, and me, like most attorneys, did not want to kind of step into the business too hard, but for maybe just representation, and that was even a cautionary sort of tale at the time, because we like our law licenses. So flash forward, it seemed like things were loosening up. I was doing a lot of criminal defense work in the space, and just in general. So by 2012, 13, things seem to be like, okay, the feds aren't getting involved. Things are happening. The risk didn't seem to be there really. And during the process, I had certain people, one certain gentleman who gave me a retainer because he was involved on the growing side. And he was one of the smart ones to give the lawyer the retainer before something happens. So now he has Johnny on the spot waiting for him. We started talking, and he was one of these, Mark Zuckerberg college dropout genius types. At least that's what I thought. And 15 years my junior, and he was interesting guy. And then we started talking. We started doing some, working together, doing some consulting for people. He brought the industry knowledge, the technical knowledge, and then I brought the maybe more business and legal side of things. So it was a good match. And we did some work, and then it was in 2014, he just brought up like, hey, do you want to get in the cannabis, extraction equipment business? And I said, absolutely, let's do it. And then my next question was, what's extraction? So, we started Precision Extraction Solutions together in 2014. We launched officially December 2nd of 2014, and we did $1 million in sales in our first 90 days. It was crazy. That's toward the tail end of that process, I realized there's no way I can be lawyer and like just 100% involved here either. So I ended up just slowly shutting down my law practice, just not taking on any new clients, finding new attorneys to pass along my existing clients to, and ultimately just became full-time Precision Extraction Solutions. Ultimately CEO. We from a $45,000 investment. We turned, 2014, it turned into over 40 million in revenue in 2019. So it was an incredible, rise there. So that's really what got me in and sort of top line.
So when you were a lawyer, were you defending people that had been accused of cannabis crimes, or was it kind of all over the board?
It was all over the board, but a substantial amount of it was, cannabis crimes. Okay. Because with the way it became legal, and it wasn't written by the legislature who went over it, ad nauseum for years. It was written by, a handful of dudes, and, that wrote it up, and the the whole legality of it and how many plants can you have, and it was so convoluted that even law enforcement, much less, the prosecutors, the judges knew exactly how to deal with it. So it was, a lot of a lot of criminal defense work for sure.
When you moved full time into the extraction business, did you miss law, practicing law?
I did. Yeah. I did. It was actually, it's fun. It's really fun, especially as a criminal defense attorney. There's a lot of action there. So like if you ever watched The Lincoln Lawyer, that was really my practice without the car.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun, and it's very serious. But there's no way. The only way. I've always been entrepreneurial. I've had a number of businesses, throughout the years. But in order to really be entrepreneurial and build like a massive practice in law would mean partnering and hiring a bunch of attorneys. And no. No, I didn't want to work with a bunch of prick attorneys, and there's a lot of cool ones too, but it was just too much for me. But the cannabis industry, it just sort of, it's sort of like when something finds you. I wasn't looking for it. Some people have had amazing pets in their lives and the pet finds them, not the other way around. That's sort of how it all happened.
So after your new pet project found you, did you dive right in? And what was it like going from, like you said, a $45,000 investment to doing $1 million in business in 90 days? I feel like that is, scaling really quickly.
It was. What we were doing primarily is taking orders. Mm-hmm. So, we had the design of this that just didn't exist. It was really what it was is a closed loop hydrocarbon system. And for your audience doesn't know, the primary way of doing extraction, cannabis extraction, using hydrocarbons is butane or propane or a mix. Primarily butane. They call it BHO extraction as well. So at the time, there was just a lot of what they called open blasting. That's where they would take a pipe, usually glass pipe, and they would stuff it with the flower or leaf from marijuana plant, and then they would take one like a butane, like what you would fill a Zippo lighter with, to fill that with, and they would blast it through it, and so the oil, it's the good parts of the plant, the THC, CBD, the terpenes and flavonoids and everything that you want sticks to that, and it pours out the other side. And there is your extract, and you just either burn off or give it time for that solvent to burn off, and there's your crude extraction oil. So, but as people were trying to scale this, they started. I should mention this. It's very explosive. Butane, propane, all of this. So as they started scaling, then people started blowing up apartments, garages, whatever. It was very dangerous. So we developed what was first really commercialized, the first, what you call a closed loop hydrocarbon extraction system. That's where it recaptures that solvent. So it doesn't go into the atmosphere. It doesn't get out there so it could find a spark and explode. So we were the first ones really to have a commercial machine, just advertising initially, just on Instagram. It was just Instagram. I mean, nobody went to our website. You could find it. No SEO, we just put it up. And from that, just got orders after orders after orders. So we would take 50% down, and then prior to delivery, we would get the balance of that plus the shipping, and then it would go. So we really used the deposits to build the equipment with. So we had manufactured. We didn't manufacture it. We designed it. We had third-party manufacture the components, and then we would put it all together. We were what you would call a final assembly test facility, a FAT facility. So we would use those deposits to manufacture all the components. We'd get them, put it together, get the rest of the money, ship it. So the business was substantially funded by deposits after that. And I mean, it's still commonplace in this industry. People generally don't give terms for too long, if at all. Especially for a lot of like CapEx type stuff, unless, for the larger companies now, sure, people that actually have great credit. You'd find a way, but now there's companies that will get out there and finance and create leases and things like that. That's just, none of that existed back then.
Well, it seems, because it's an entirely new design, were people just that excited? I mean, I feel like there's a little bit of risk there. Like, we have this figured out. We don't have one for you to see yet. We assure you it's going to work. But, what was it like until you got that first, system out in the industry and up and running?
It's funny you should ask that. It just reminded me. So as we're shipping the first units out, mind you, there's a time frame, it was a couple months, and going out the door, so excited. So I look at my partner and I say, dumb question. And mind you, I had not been involved in manufacturing. I don't have like a lineage of manufacturers or people in my family. We don't. This was new to me and him. So I asked him as things going out the door, I said, actually, how does it perform really, when you've used it? He goes, what? I said, you've run this, right? And he goes, no. I'm like, mother effer, right? He goes, bro, it's science. Yeah, luckily it worked like a charm.
Yeah.
It was called the Pro X1. It's still like considered a workhorse in the industry. It was probably the best, design one the company like literally had. Like, it was kind of crazy.
So no prototype, just from the napkin sketch right to the floor?
Yeah, and I pretty much. And I think some of that stuff was open source out there, but nobody actually like built the commercial one. We did. Pretty much. And that was it.
Was your partner the engineer? Like it was his design?
Again, I think a lot of it was open source, out there, but pretty much he had the prototype. Like he actually, before he approached me with it, he actually went and like had these Chinese manufacturers build this thing per these specs. And so like he had it together. I'm like, okay, well, it's done. Like this is it. Because you can actually see it. It wasn't just on paper. He built it, but then apparently he didn't run it. I thought he ran it. But it worked. It worked. We got a lot. Yeah, it was interesting.
No, it worked. But it almost was like, it was almost like your manufacturing ignorance was bliss because you didn't know like the steps you were maybe missing. You're just like, yeah, he's got it. He says it works. It works. There we go.
This is, I guess, and I've learned this over the years is you got to be cautious just to trust people because they're the experts. They know the tech, and they, a lot of times, that, moving forward, I learned that lesson, numerous times. That happened to work out really great, but sometimes just relying on the quote unquote experts, whether or not it's an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, you need to do your own research. You need to really, as Reagan says, trust but verify, because, it all worked out. It did. But, over the years, there were sometimes we got a little bit because of that. And the one thing about precision that we did was even when we screwed up, we would do backflips for customers. We were all about customer service. So I was fine losing money on, some customers if we really had to, make them happy. Because to me, it was more about the aggregate, of that all. But yeah, real interesting, ride with that. And I did learn a lot over the years in terms of manufacture. We didn't know, it was the wild, wild west. We didn't know like ASME, like it was about like 6 months, 9 months into it, like, what's that?
Yeah.
Where'd it got? And then so like the main one Chinese manufacturer that we're using at the time, gave us a certificate And they lied. It was forged. It was a forged. And for your listeners, ASME is the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And for our purposes, we're talking about pressure vessels. You have to have, depending on the size of them and the amount of pressure, they need to be ASME rated. And this is an organization that certifies them as safe. So you don't want to have a vessel that's with a lot of pressure and it's not built properly, and it could, it could explode basically.
Right.
And then a bunch of butanes everywhere, and it's massively dangerous. So, but yeah, that was, so we started ASME certifying everything. It's just regulations were slowly coming into place. The regulation was catching up with the industry. The industry was just moving so fast, and then we were catching up with the regulations too. I learned to really like them because it's hard for competitors. If you can keep ahead of the regulations, or at least in pace with them, you're going to have a competitive advantage. So these regulations, they're good regulations. They're designed to, in this case, operator safety for the operators and safety for, the property. So competitors being slow to catch up with that, or they just like the wild, wild west, and if that, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. They're not going to last. They can't compete. So a lot of regulations are good for business if you can keep pace with them or ahead of them.
You had said there have been a couple of times where you guys got bit. Was that one of them, the forged ASME certification? And can you think of any others that, let's just say, were a teachable moment?
Yeah, well, that was a teachable moment. We didn't get bit by it. We had checked, because it's public. You can go to asme.org and check. And there was something fishy about them. They lied. And, that learning lesson was, wow, watch out. Especially, new company, Prodigy, Processing Solutions, nothing's Chinese. No, I've learned lots of lessons with them. They will start with good quality and then just go to bad quality on purpose. And a strange cultural thing. They, in their minds, culturally, you as the customer are supposed to expect them to do exactly that. And if you don't notice, you're stupid. That's it. Yeah. So where here in America, we think, oh, this is a quality supplier. It's their reputation. We don't expect that. They do. So a lot of this kind of behavior is normal because they expect you. Apparently in that case, I don't know, they expected us to understand that. Of course we'd forge a document. Oh, caught us.
That's what you wanted.
Yeah, caught us. You got it. Yeah. So learn not to we didn't ultimately, even the metal that we use for food grade manufacturing, it needs to be at least 304 grade stainless steel. Okay. And this is just a certain mix of, metals that makes up what constitutes 304. Basically, it doesn't rust. You don't want cutlery in your kitchen. If it rusts, it is not 304. It is something right. And if it says it's 304, it's a lie. So if you don't have that, and then you're using these caustic substances, you could have metal leaching. A lot of bad things can happen. We noticed that happening out there in the field, some green stuff coming out. I know our competitors had too, and it's not good. And now you're talking about consumer safety. Mm-hmm. Now this has become a very big deal in the past sort of year and a half, but particularly in the past, say, 3-6 months with DEA rescheduling, that move, and the idea of FDA coming in, as well as, and that's on the pharma side, but on just all these lawsuits in California about products just not being tested, having heavy metals and pesticides, all this stuff, and people lying about stuff, and this all goes to consumer safety. But back to the point. I learned not to trust China. Like, so for Prodigy, it's all 316L pharmaceutical grade stainless steel made in the USA. So we make them. Our manufacturers, also partners, Mitchell Fabricators in Hartsville, Ohio, and that's all we do. Made in USA, 316L stainless steel. My joke was that with the Chinese, you don't know if is it really 304 stainless steel, is it 316? I started calling it Chinesium.
Chinesium? All right. Well, I mean,
No
I
idea.
think I think you got to trademark that one.
Maybe.
You had mentioned consumer safety, but before that, operator safety. You know, I think sometimes people think that the extraction process is the one that is the most dangerous to your average cannabis operator. Do you think that's still the case?
With hydrocarbon, butane?
Just, cannabis extraction in general.
No, I mean, if you have the proper equipment, I mean, it's like your car is much more explosive. I mean, you trust your car every day. I mean, assuming it's combustible engine, you fill it up, you go to the gas station, you don't expect anything to blow up, and same thing. Hydrocarbon, again, butane, propane, it's the best way to do it. I mean, you can't go a day without eating some sort of soy extract. Literally, it's in something you're eating. It's a massive industry. They basically extract the oil from soybeans. And the way they do that is with hexane, which is also another light hydrocarbon, but way nastier than butane or propane. And it's conducted on an industrial scale very safely. So like our equipment is very safe. It really is ASME certified. That being said, you still need to meet certain precautions, have gas airflows, which is like a blast-proof room, which is what they call it, C1, D1 rated, and that exchanges the air. I believe every 10 seconds you have gas detection. You have alarms for that. You have, some jurisdictions also require, fire system as well, whether or not it's sprinklers or whatever. So you have to have all this stuff, and that just in case you're going to have some fail safes. Now, ethanol, I mean, it burns, and and the worst disasters have been them. CO2, that's not a good way to extract anything. You have these pressure, our pressure vessels are rated to like 250 PSI. Really you're going to operate around 150. Like supercritical CO2, they're like minimum like 1500 PSI. I mean, you drop one of those canisters, it's a missile. I mean, so every way you can do it has its dangers, at least commercially viable ways that you can scale. Like solventless, no, that's safe. It's safe, but you can't. It's for artisanal production. There's no way you can really scale that up to some sort of large scale, consistent type, mass marketed product. Not happening.
What was the rest of that first year like? Did your first million in 90 days. What was the first year like? And at what point did you decide that maybe you had to move away from Chinese manufactured goods?
Well, that took some years to catch up with. The first year we did in 2015, a little over 3.5 million in revenue. And then as the years went on, we did like 7, and then 15, 16, and it kept doubling. And, a lot of lessons along the way. We started, again, I was handling the business side, legal, like, that side. I wasn't on the tech side as much. So on that side, what was happening, we started hiring engineers. So we had this consultant, and apparently he wanted to turn us, remember, we're in Detroit. So I think he wanted to turn us into General Motors or Ford. And next, we have like 8 engineers, and learned a lot from that because they'll design stuff that you're going to need an octopus to run. Overly engineered, like missing just the most basic stuff. Found the best way, because we had a lot of like super techs that were like technicians, like they're literally operators. So we had great ones, and they need to be at the front of that design process. You know, it's sort of like if you have a NASCAR team, but you're not going to listen to the driver. These guys know how it works. They have the real world experience. You know, could they do a SolidWorks CAD drawing? Absolutely not. But that's what the other people are for, the engineers and the SolidWorks operators. So there was a lot learned over the years with that. It wasn't until the problem with it, if you're playing like the price game or trying to stay in sort of a reasonably competitive position on price. And we were always we were more expensive because we're like, hey, you're getting more value, so it worked. But not like massively more expensive. But to manufacture domestically was so much more expensive that it really would have sort of priced us out of most of the marketplace at the time. So it was only toward the end we started domesticating, and that was in 2020, getting into 2021. Ultimately, the company was acquired by a publicly traded company in October of 21, and that was that. I was gone. But backing up into it, with Prodigy, now a new company, again, Mitchell Fabricators is a partner. Mm-hmm. So we're working with him as he's an equity partner in Prodigy. So we're getting our all of that at cost, right? Mm-hmm. Cost of goods, cost of labor. And then rather than Prodigy maintaining a warehouse and doing final assembly test and having 100 plus SKUs per product, Mitchell's doing that. So we have one SKU, and we can keep our product rather than having two markups, because in this case, we're essentially the manufacturer. We can still keep that cost competitiveness, provide that extra value, which is it's impossible to do if we don't do it how we just did it. And we're saving a lot of money by not having to have, a large warehouse and a bunch of people screwing things together in terms of a fat operation.
Because extraction equipment is typically a high ticket item, did you see a lot of companies kind of come and go as a result of like their lack of capital for new equipment or to keep equipment running optimally?
There's still a lot of companies come and go. I don't know if it's because of lack of capital. Like I said, anybody in the industry, they were doing what we were doing. I mean, you take half deposit. If your cost went up, you might take 65%. And then the balance, prior to it leaving your warehouse or drop ship or whatever you're doing. Pretty much just, I don't think it was because of the capital, because there was so much money flying around. Once you came in later, yeah, if they couldn't establish themselves, because we were so early, it was easy to establish ourselves as a player without spending ungodly amounts of money. There's no competition. I mean, ultimately, when we redid our website the right way, this is like in June, July of 2015, like people were saying, and we did it internally at that point. We got so sick of web design companies that made all these promises. They would say, oh, in 6 months, you should start seeing some SEO. 3 days, front page, top of the fold, Google. Within 5-6 days, we were number one, and just followed the rules and ended up being like top of the SEO game, forever after that. A lot of people were playing catch up because I think we were really running the business as a business, as much as we, were kind of yahoos and you, and we still presented and worked hard to be sophisticated and to provide that value, to provide that customer service that you would expect when you're buying, packages like equipment systems that cost as much as an exotic sports car or a mansion. I mean, you got to do that. So if, somebody's not providing that level of service or projecting that they're going to be there in, 2, 3, 4 years to support this equipment, you're going to go with the other guy. And we were that guy.
Over the 5 years that you grew with Precision, did the design for the equipment change quite a bit, or was it pretty true to that original idea?
I think that the concept's the same. I mean, in terms of like solvent to biomass ratio and pressures and temperatures and, things, they changed over time, but the science of it, as we say, it is the same. So the idea is scaling up. It's always an issue. Scaling down is sort of a lot easier than scaling up. So over the years, operations got bigger and bigger, and how do you accommodate that? And you can't just sort of just make it bigger, like everything bigger. It doesn't really work like that. So there were some, like, a lot of changes, but it essentially, it's more like ergonomically how to run it, how to, make it, easier for the operator. Like now what we've learned is colder is better. So with Prodigy's equipment, it's all rated negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, which is, you never want to run it that cold because the melting point / freezing point of butane is about negative 160-ish. But the colder you go, you can avoid things like winterization. So our equipment, there's inline winterization, which is a process of basically removing the fats and lipids and things. Sort of, again, for your audience, if you took some grandma's chicken noodle soup and put it in the fridge, and you took it out the next day, you're going to see this big fatty layer at the top. That's the fats. And then you just scrape it off and it's gone. That's winterization. So when we run at least negative 80 to negative 90 Celsius, we can do inline winterization and avoid it completely. And again, that's like sometimes 24 hours you're saving in time. So, and you can check it out at prodigyusa.com.
When you had mentioned it previously, but how did the sale to Agrify come about?
Oh boy. We went through a number of like sort of M&A type rounds. And this was, and mind you, during this time frame from starting in about 2017, 18, like, remember, lawyer, don't have a bunch of business people or manufacturing people, in the family or connected with. I started taking all these executive education courses at University of Michigan, Ross School of Business, Harvard, ultimately, finished up the U of M one, and then Wharton as well, their executive program, because I needed to learn a lot more about the business language, right? Oh, and for your listeners, if you go through the Wharton executive education and you complete it, you are a Wharton alum. So I'm a Wharton alum, which will probably piss off a lot of people who got the MBAs. Might do that whole scenario. But I learned a ton. So in 2018, we were looking for funding because as you're growing, there's what difference between growing and scaling. If you scale, like meaning if hyper growth, you're gonna need capital. You're gonna be hiring more people. You're trying to get ahead of that the trajectory that your company's on. You want to take advantage of the industry, and if you don't scale, somebody else will. You have to engage in certain activities in order to make that happen, and you can literally run out of money doing it. So realized we needed capital. We ultimately got a $5 million investment from, it was Canopy Rivers. This was a Canadian VC venture capital company out of Toronto, sort of like the stepchild cousin of Canopy Growth-ish. So we got that investment, and then that was February of 2019. So moving into the like September, October, November of 2019, we got approached by a publicly traded company to basically buy Precision, right? And it was an $80 million, ultimately it became an $80 million cash offer. So it was February 20, I remember the days, February 24th of 2020, signed the paper, the LOI. And wow, it was just me and my partner and then the Canopy River, so I own personally about almost 44 or 45% of the company at that point. And so sign the paperwork, and you do the math on that one. March 13th, about COVID hit, and it just derailed everything, including that. So that was done. And then we had the whole disaster of COVID being locked down, and, anyway, 2 weeks, flatten the curve to, who knows? Anyway, that's why I live in Florida now. Thank you.
Okay.
Once I got all that money, I'm like, I'm going to Miami. Still do manufacturing. We can't really build like manufacture here. That's why our manufacturing is in the Rust Belt, just headquarters in the Sun Belt. So 2020, it really just a disaster, like story of survival, not success. But getting into like August, September, realized, okay, like that didn't work out. We still need to get bigger. And so I went on my rounds with all our competitors and met with them, and some sort of, let's say, more complementary type companies where we were the main distributor of their products. And that ultimately would be one of them was Cascade Sciences, which supplied vacuum ovens and other sort of peripherals and post-processing equipment that was needed for the entire process. And all these companies out there, we were the number one distributor. 80% of our revenue, by the way, came from third-party distributed, like drop ship products. It was really important shift to make to do that. So ultimately, meeting with all these competitors and sort of maybe complementary companies, trying to do an M&A strategy. Ultimately, it didn't work out with any, but I got a chance to, know and become closer with competitors and vice versa. And really a cool industry, man. All these guys, I give them props. I mean, especially like our side of things is we're the monkey in the middle. It's not the sexy part. So you have the grow, and then you have the dispensaries, and again, for your audience, if there's anybody new out there, whatever isn't flower or leaf, it's an extract. I mean, so the vape has to happen somehow, and the gummies and whatever it is. So there's a small, like really relevant group that bends metal and makes chemistry sets, and we were one of them. And this whole industry, which is your whole publication, David, Canopy, Cannabis Extraction News is all about it. And it's a fun side of the business. And I got to know, again, personally, everybody, hang out, broke bread. Ultimately, that didn't end up culminating for a while. It was I had reached out to Cascade, the CEO over there, sometime during this whole process, hey, maybe this might be an idea to consider about merging. What I realized was that in order to catch the attention of Wall Street, you got to be 100 million-ish in revenue. That gets their attention. So ultimately, he came back to me from Cascade and said, hey, listen, I think this is a good idea. Let's talk. Again, by May, or ish of 2021 at this point, we agreed, and we came to terms. Ultimately, we announced it, and it was huge Bloomberg announcement. It was on a TV with the box. Merger forms $100 million company. Mission accomplished. Officially, I believe it was around July 1st of 21. And the strategy worked. I mean, it was not 2 weeks later, Agrify reached out to us through their investment banking firm and wanted to talk prospective acquisition. By August 12th, we had signed that LOI. Ultimately, during that whole process, I became disenchanted. The price ended up coming down. It was a 60-40 split between cash and their stock. And mind you, now it wasn't 3 people. Now we had Cascades Group, which is about 7 different-ish, maybe 7, 8 different member shareholders on that side of things. Ultimately, I'm like, I'm not doing this, and I got outvoted. So it went through. I mean, but I don't know if you're familiar, or maybe for your audience, in an operating agreement or any corporate documents, you could have what's called drag-along rights. So we had that in our operating agreement, which meant if you're dragged through a transaction unwillingly, you get certain benefits that are outlined in whatever clause that is. And ours was no non-compete. And like Agrify, they didn't catch that until literally probably the last week and a half, 2 weeks when they were wanting to close. And it just changed everything. And for anybody out there, the whole deal is like, if you're doing this kind of M&A stuff, the deal's supposed to die a bunch of times. So if the deal ends up dying, oh my God, I'm like, it's just horrible. It's a thing that happens, and people come back to the table and it starts up again. So I pretty much said, okay, well, I mean, what kind of publicly traded company is gonna, like, I was the CEO of the merged companies at this point, right? So a publicly traded company can acquire, any business and not get a non-compete from founder, largest shareholder, and CEO. I just said, listen, I want all cash. That'll do it. I'll sign whatever. And I think I tacked an extra $1 million on it. And they ultimately said, F you, and they just went through with the transaction, and I got dragged along, and that's how I got to start Prodigy Processing Solutions, because I did not have a non-compete on that exit. So I used that money. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
they
that
funded
was what was
competitor.
Yeah, that was what was surprising to me. Was I was curious, how long did you wait before you started Prodigy? Was it like next day?
No, I mean, a lot of soul searching after that. It's kind of crazy when you're in a business, and anybody, if you're really gonna work, it could be, there's no such thing as live work balance, or it's live work blend. And so that whole thing was crazy. The whole ride was crazy, and especially leading up to that end, like, it was months of just torture and work, and I was fighting at the same, as a equity owner, but I'm still trying to do my duty as CEO and not kill the deal, which I could have, because everything was in my computer, over years of doing things, and I just did my duty, and it landed where it landed. But so we were just talking about the when I started again. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I'm losing. This is PTSD here. So once it ended, I mean, man, cash rich, job poor. October 1st, just, and there's nothing. And it's just, you go through this time of like this sort of, it feels great at first, and then you're kind of like, okay, well, what do I do? And then it's kind of like, you don't realize that your identity is tied to what you were doing. And it just sort of, when it just happened, you don't notice these things. So it took some months of kind of like, a lot of tequila and, retrospection. It was in January of 22, just set up the LLC, and started leaning into it, started designing equipment and working with some tech people. I think it was March, April of 22, and then just went from there. Really, we launched the company over a year and a month ago. So we launched our website, I think it was August 23rd of 23. It took a lot of time to get there. But everybody knew who we were before that, because not only did I use their money to move to Miami and create a competitive business, I in October of 22, I ended up acquiring 9.9% of Agrify stock and attempted a hostile takeover of their company, which it got a lot of media as well. Ultimately, I ended up abandoning the attempt because they diluted their shareholders, including myself, by almost 70% in this process. But it got so much media attention and it was literally a week before the MJ Biz show in Vegas of 23. So literally nobody who knew what Prodigy was 5 days before that, but by then everybody knew who we were, because it was a rather big deal. And Agrify, at that point, they had, they acquired Precision, Cascade, what was it, Lab Society, and Peer Pressure, right? Mm-hmm. And it's massive display and everything. So they were a really big presence, and this was a really big deal, and it was really fresh. And as part of my SEC required filing, I had put in there you have to put your intentions in there. This is sort of like when, and I'm not comparing myself to Elon Musk at all, but when he went after Twitter the same way, you have to file this form in 13D and state what your intentions are. And so I stated my intentions were to, remove the CEO and, replace CEO and remove and replace the board, and to merge Agrify with my new company, Prodigy Processing Solutions. Okay. So I ended up making a little money selling all their stock because it was incredibly volatile at the time. Not a lot, but enough. It wasn't a loser, but ultimately it was big success on a peripheral sort of, marketing and name recognition thing, even though that wasn't the intent.
What was the intent? Was the intent a hostile takeover?
Yeah, I mean, their value, again, from the time of the acquisition until even now, that stock is 99.9999999% down. So at the time, and this is an interesting thing because moving to, you're in Wisconsin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So being in Michigan, Detroit area, we don't have hedge fund managers laying around, super big finance people. I'm assuming you don't in Wisconsin either.
That's a fair assumption. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have access to, we don't even think about that culture so much. We're thinking about just working our, knuckles down to the bones and harder, grind. While these people in the finance world are just kind of making moves. So when I moved to Miami, it was interesting. During COVID, all these New Yorkers moved down here, and I would say I've spent some time in New York, and you don't get in these circles because they've been there forever and they have closed circles. They don't want to make new friends, especially some asshole from Detroit or wherever, right? Basically, if you're anywhere west of Manhattan, you just if you're west of Manhattan, you're just freaking hillbilly and useless. Yeah, but down wild, here, man. Exactly in Miami, this is great because they want to make friends too. We're all new, so I end up becoming close, just drinking with some of these guys, and they're like, "What do you do?" And then literally these super finance guys, investment bankers, hedge fund managers, and they pull it up on their phone and they're looking at the valuation, basically the market cap. And it was so low. It was, I think at the time it was like around 3.5 million or something. So I'm like, wow. Like, so the way they look at it, well, you can get, 9.99% of the company for like 350 grand. And there's enough, and you can see there's enough movement in the stock to get it. And so he says, so you should do a hostile takeover. I mean, the business, you ran the business. It's the valuation is so low, it's a steal, right? Mm-hmm. So and I'm like, you crazy. Does not compute. And then like literally 2 more sips of Patron. And I said, tell me more. And they taught me, and it's great. It was great. But again, I think what it taught me also, a lot of how we think and what we consider is what we're exposed to. And it's one thing being exposed to it academically or reading about it on the internet or wherever versus hearing it from the horse's mouth. And then like something like that just become, now all of a sudden you're in a different world that you didn't know you never thought about it, not having access to it. So it was interesting. So that's what happened with the hostile takeover.
Did you suffer any financial blowback from the takeover attempt?
Mm-mm. I only had the stock for a short amount of days because I got that 9.9%. Then they did the dilution. I forgot it was like I forgot it was a company they sold stock, whatever it was. It was a massive dilution though. So really I was their largest shareholder for maybe 3-4 days. And then I just sold literally everything. But mind you, I had some that was already still restricted stock from the acquisition. So I was already sitting on some of that. So I bought the rest. And then pretty much when that happened, I sold it all. And actually I made a few bucks. So it wasn't, no financial impact. I mean, negative impact at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any still hard feelings over the entire deal?
Me?
I mean, on any side.
Or everybody. Like, no, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I think, ultimately, I guess this is, interesting because people are going to do what's in their selfish interest as a general proposition. But one thing I learned from this is interesting is like there were some people they thought were really loyal in Precision. I mean, without getting into all the details about the level of closeness and you're my brother and I got your back and I got yours and like all this, and real actions to back it up. And then post acquisition after some time, learned something really weird. But it makes sense. It wasn't loyalty. It was obedience. That's what it was. Now they have a new master. Now that's where their obedience lies. And it is, and if you think that all of, when you're kind of on the top and you got kind of, I didn't want to call it yes men, or yes people, because it was like, you're thinking, oh, this is genuine. And maybe it's naive to think that way. You want to think that way if you're a genuine, decent human being. But some people, it's obvious they're playing a game. They're being opportunists. Other people, no. So,
well, I think that's part of it. Like, especially you were a startup, and a lot of times, especially with the people that you kind of come up together with, I think it's one of two ways. You either have that lifelong bond, or like you said, some people are just opportunistic, and it's just about the money.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Like it's one of those things. If you meet somebody and you really connect with them quickly, and you really feel like they understand you, and you're either dealing with one or two things: a saint, which is not a lot of them out there, or a psychopath. Be careful, watch out. And you just got to be cautious not to think everybody else is like you.
So What's life like now that you've started Prodigy? And, it's still a fairly nascent cannabis industry. Is there plenty of room for competition?
Absolutely. Now, I mean, everything that we're doing, again, 316 pharmaceutical grade stainless steel, it's all of our stuff has material certifications, traceability, everything that you need, clean in place technology for pharma. And if you have pharma GMP, you automatically have dietary supplements and food. So we're the only one out there really doing it on the hydrocarbon side, which is really the best way to do it, for to get the quality out of the product that you need or you want on a mass scale without a bunch of hiccups and chemicals that you got to get rid of later. So now, I mean, this is the whole goal. Like, was when we started Prodigy, that ultimately the feds are going to either deschedule, reschedule, something's going to happen, and it needed to happen in some fashion. So this is, again, why from day one that everything that we do at Prodigy, it's not just, okay, operator safety now is a given and consumer safety is a given for us, for Prodigy. Now we have the fastest equipment, the fastest recovery time, the most, ergonomically, useful, profit-driven equipment, designed specifically, toward targeting cannabinoids. So now here comes Schedule 3, where the DEA announced, I think it was May 22nd or something of this year, that they want to reschedule, and the DOJ's behind it, the HHS, the FDA, all the three-letter acronyms, the White House, the president, et cetera. They took public comments for a month that ended around July 22nd. I think 92% in favor. Mm-hmm. Well, 92% of Americans agree on nothing.
It's very true.
Except maybe Chick-fil-A, it's delicious. But besides that, just nothing. I mean, it's massive, support. So the way it works on August 20th was the 30-day time frame after those comments closed with the Federal Register, which is like they could have on that day said, it's Schedule 3 is here. What happened was the director of the DEA, Ann Milgram, I believe is her name, she's being prudent. She's set up a hearing. She didn't have to do that. So where people can voice their grievances, and that's happening on December 2nd, I believe at DEA headquarters. I was stunned that they're pushing it past the election because this is I thought it's a very partisan thing, but kudos to her for just being prudent, doing her job. So I think, but the writing's on the wall. It's going to happen. So with Schedule 3 happening, now there's so many opportunities out there. Like normally it would cost like tens of millions of dollars to build a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility. Consider your reasonable average size cannabis lab, pick a state, any state. They already meet like most of the, if not all of the DEA requirements, which is security, not having, cameras, like protocols on coming and going and badging and, cameras and gates and everything, right? All the DEA cares about is that you're not, like drug dealers don't get a pharmaceutical manufacturing license. And it's not going out the back door and it's not a bunch of convicted felons and, you're not drug dealers. So the other side of it is just being FDA, GMP or CGMP compliant. I'm telling you, nobody's compliant out there. They're not, period. They're not, they're hardly food grade compliant. And I my side of the business, and I've had the question, well, how do you know? Because I sold them their equipment. So most, and it's not, the equipment's not GMP compliant. So to bring an existing lab up to those standards, I mean, literally, it's not like depending on where they're currently at, it could be anywhere between 500 and 1,000 and $2 million. Okay, depending on where they're starting from. But now all you have to do is apply with your state pharma board, right, to become a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility, and set up a different LLC if, don't mix it up with your cannabis business. Maybe a Suite B as well for the address. The DEA registration is like, it takes 30 minutes to fill out the app. I don't know, 6-8 weeks to get it. They have to approve you. It's registration. It's not licensing. And you may or may not have to register with the FDA only if the state, pharmacy board requires you to. That's it. So now for maybe $500,000, a couple $1 million, you're not stuck in your state. You're literally pharmaceutical, biotech. This is like, you're not just nationwide, you're worldwide. And what's going to be needed out there are these pharmaceutical APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients. Now, here's a bunch of people like Prodigy's customers that have labs, and they have the know-how, they have the experience, we have the equipment. They, just get the GMP and you're good. And it's not a hard road. And next thing you know, what costs you maybe $300, $400, $500 a kilo to make, say it's 99% plus pure THC distillate, or 99% plus pure CBD isolate. It's not that difficult. Now we have Prodigy, we have the equipment to take people right there, even who don't understand it. And we're talking to pharmaceutical companies right now because they want to incorporate these into their processes. We're converting current state licensed cannabis facilities while we're talking here. The amount that you're going to be selling a liter of the distillate or a kilogram of the isolate is going to be in the tens of thousands. Like really, it's more estimated between $20,000 and $50,000. Because the industry, it's going to be a massive explosion, and there is a real shortage of AP, like pharmaceutical grade. It doesn't need to be just pharmaceutical grade. It has to come from a pharmaceutical facility.
Right.
And so and again, you can make it for like $500 on a bad day. You're buying trim at like $25, $35 a pound. And we have a calculator on our website too. If you go to the news and tips page to see, you get to put all the input values, the percentage, for example, of THC that's in the trim or whatever you're buying, how much it costs per pound, how many pounds you're going to process, and then the price, ultimately the translation, because we go from imperial to metric, and now we got kilograms over here. And you can find out the numbers are astronomical. And I should mention also on the M&A front, because a lot of people got burned in the cannabis industry. So getting money is, it's difficult, right? Because it's just the space right now. But they got to put in their heads, they're no longer like cannabis. They're getting money for a pharmaceutical business. A pharmaceutical startup where somebody can invest, like say you go hoo-ha all out, you're $5 million, but it would cost any pharmaceutical company tens of millions of dollars to do that. And now you're doing R&D for, whether it's Pfizer or like Lilly or an umpteen amount, of pharma companies out there. You're positioned to go public. These are all your customers. They're also all your acquirers too. And you're producing product for R&D or engaging in R&D with them or universities. And then you're ultimately creating that API that is going to be relatively immediately needed by compounding pharmacies to fill these prescriptions at an astronomical price.
So When you wrote the letter to the Federal Register supporting rescheduling, did you feel that it fell on deaf ears, or did it accomplish what you set out to accomplish?
I'll just put my 2 cents in. We're a large player, and I'm a large historical player in the industry. I have personal knowledge of the lack of GMP compliance out there. And I think it's going to put a lot of pressure out there, and it's going to put pressure on the states to also step up. None of the states meet, like, their regulations don't get close to FDA standards for, again, I'm talking about for food or dietary supplements. It doesn't even have to be pharma. But they fall so short of that. They don't have enforcement. For all these reasons, bottom line is people, they're sloppy. You had, oh my God, that woman who has the business that cleans the air. I watched your podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she's like, she's talking about mold. I can't believe they think mold's okay. Like, they use
Oh, yeah.
her equipment, it won't be mold, but they're selling moldy, like, flour.
Yeah.
And I think she said it, like, oh, it's okay to poison your customers. Who does that? I mean, bizarre.
Yeah.
So she is so right. I was like, oh my God. And like again, the whole industry has been focused on like operator safety and just getting the highest percentage of THC into whatever newfangled product they can get out there, but not consumer safety. And that requires, and I don't want to scare anybody. I mean, like, most of this, everything's fine, but is it?
No, that still blows my mind. And yeah, the conversation, it was Jill Ellsworth with Willow Industries.
Yes.
But I've had that conversation a couple of times in the industry where it's like, having covered, general manufacturing, there's never been like where people are like, I'm going to die on this hill and demand that I can sell a moldy product. It's like just wild to me.
No, and that goes to the lack of sophistication, I think, like in a lot of the industry. You would think like Cresco, Verano, Trulieve. I mean, they got to step it up because the carrot is making a lot of money in pharma. The stick is don't get a product liability lawsuit.
Right.
You got one problem, and it is going to be huge. And I'm a contributing writer for MG Magazine, and by the way, Bioscience. Now I'm talking to them. They would like some content because they understand the collision of cannabis and pharma. It's happening. What does it mean? What does it mean to the cannabis industry? What does it mean? Now they're interested. What does it mean to biotech and pharmaceutical industry? But I wrote this article back to MG. I mean, it's all about just product liability, and people don't understand that, like. And I don't know if it was even covered on your thing. Again, my head's always kind of in the lawyer thing, and lawyer's all about liability. If you buy, say, a bag of like Frito-Lays at a gas station or CVS, you name it, and you get sick, and that's the reason why. You're not just suing Frito-Lay or whatever corporation. You're suing the place you bought it from, whoever delivered it there, was it stored on the way? You are the whole chain of custody and distribution. That's who is subject to being sued. Now, this is why CVS and like a gas station that's corporate owned, not privately owned, is not going to put out products that are hoo-ha, Yahoo stuff that they can't trust. It's all big brands because they trust them, because they know they're going to be subject to a product liability lawsuit. Now, put yourself in the position of a dispensary owner. You just can put anything on the shelf, or do you want to know who your supplier is? And yeah, when it comes to, Jill and Willow Industries, like if it's like leaf or flower, what's in it? Right? Is it safe? If it's anything else, is some form of extract, are they using GMP you know, like compliant equipment? Are they using GMP processes? Do they have a Home Depot bucket, an orange Home Depot bucket in the middle of their lab? By the way, that's for your audience. That is not GMP certified or compliant.
Just good tip. Good tip. If you have a 5-gallon bucket, regardless of the branding,
Right.
not good. Not a good scene. Not a good scene. So has it been hard for you going through this industry for nearly 10 years now, with still having that like lawyer mentality and just like, how do you navigate just like, oh, red flag, red flag, red flag, and just keep going forward?
Well, I think the lawyer thing helps a lot in a lot of ways. It's, law school doesn't teach you how to be a lawyer. It does not. It teaches you how to think like a lawyer. And that is somewhat of a scientific, method, but you're not going to be a good debater, good at winning over a jury, unless you know you can put yourself in the other person's shoes or multiple perspectives in order to strengthen your position. Because otherwise, I just believe this and you're done. So I think it helps incredibly. So even when we're to be able to see the other sides, really sort of view things contextually rather than in a linear fashion. So, I think it's been very helpful. And again, like back to that other point, the carrot and the stick. The carrot is, hey, here's a lot of money to make with DEA rescheduling. But the stick is product liability lawsuits. It's getting like literally FDA is gonna start kicking doors in on these state operations. FYI, mark my words, because all these lawsuits that are going on in California, just because you're not federally like operating under some federal regulations, FDA still is there to protect the American people that are visitors to the United States. That's what their job is. Nothing's preventing them from kicking your lab's door in. Nothing. And this arrogance, and I'm going to do it the way I'm going to do it, it's insane. It's just insane, and it's unsophisticated, and it's naive, and I think maybe they got to start thinking, like, maybe ask their lawyers. Yeah.
There were two things in particular from the letter to the Federal Register that I wanted to pull out, and you've
Please.
more or less covered this a little bit, but I just wanted to get a comment on it. Just, you had mentioned the significant lack of GMP implementation that is alarmingly commonplace. And then you also mentioned that cannabis extraction, quote, is woefully underregulated. You kind of spell it out in plain English, but, do you still feel that impassioned about it?
That letter was written a month and a half ago, I think. Nothing's changed. I mean, nothing has changed. Remember, on the operator safety side, you have what they were called the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction. So you have, that's most often the fire marshal, and it's a local fire safety expert. And they're coming in and making sure you meet all these requirements. It's awesome. Good. The operator's safe. It's, just here's your equipment. It's certified. And the operation is, and there's maybe some solvent limits in that jurisdiction or whatever it might be. Now, great, done. What about consumer safety? Without the FDA, who's that? That's right, the local health department. Mm-hmm. They're too busy, like, checking out if, they're wearing hairnets and gloves at the local diner to, like, they don't, making sure the temperatures are right. Like, there's so much GMP going on at your local Taco Bell or burger joint. Just can't leave meat laying around all night and then serve it the next day or fit. Like, it just doesn't happen. I mean, and if it does, it's bad. But there's all these rules for compliance from the health department with your local restaurants. And a lot of them have the grades out there. And if something has a C or a D, think twice. It's nasty. It's so nasty, somebody's bound to get sick. And, like one salmonella outbreak and your business is gone. So they are incredibly ill-equipped to understand like large food grade manufacturing or dietary supplement manufacturing processes, in especially in this unique cannabis world that we are both operating in. So there is effectively like it's either shit oversight or no oversight. So that is why. And yeah, there's not. It's just not happening. And when you have that, and people, like, I'm not saying every single operator out there, but I know there's lack of compliance on the equipment side, again, because I sold them the equipment. The one that's not compliant, this Prodigy is compliant, plus some. If they don't have to, they're not going to. That's mostly the sort of back to the opportunist psychopath mentality, and they can save a couple bucks by not having to invest in consumer safety and not, putting cooties in their customers' products. And the dispensaries are not like asking questions and pressing this issue. Then it's just not going to get done. So that's the state of the industry. Nothing's changed yet.
I do appreciate you being very generous with your time. And I know that we've gone a little over, so I apologize. But I wanted to ask, you've dedicated a large portion of your career to advancing cannabis extraction. Are you happy with the results? So far?
I'm ecstatic. No, this is a great industry, great people. And I think now, again, it's every time something happens like that with a schedule, that you have a large group of people that are, we like it like it is, this regulation, F that. But it's gone through so many phases of new laws, new regulations, new whatever. So it's nothing new that's happening. So it's just another exciting time. It's another exciting time. And when I say like Green Rush 2.0, this is the second one with this basically cannabinoids, APIs converting. Do the math. Like it's easy to make $5,700,000 gross profit a day with our little system that does 7 kilograms an hour of isolate or distillate, for example. It's astronomical what's happening out there. So it's not that like I'm still kind of, it's cool. I'm really excited about where this industry is going and what the next thing is going to be, which I would put money on it. I am putting my whole business is on it, that this is the direction it's going, and it's going to be great for whoever hops on that train.
So when you're talking to an old customer or somebody else in the industry and you're like, hey, I know you're not CGMP compliant because I sold you your system, what do they say to that?
It's I think a combination, where either they get it and like, hey, yeah, we're talking, let's move things forward. Or the alternative is sort of this cognitive dissonance where it doesn't fit their worldview because they've been doing it the same for so long. Why would we change? And it's those ones that if they don't get it, they don't get it. Sometimes it's a money issue too. A lot of businesses have suffered. Again, a lot of competition, but this is one of those things you're gonna have to do it. Sooner or later, everybody's going to have to step up to real GMP, and it's gonna be the FDA for all of it. Right now, we're looking at whoever wants to partake on the benefits of Schedule 3 and ride that wave. They're going to have to do it in order to be compliant. But it's happening anyway. So it's either, you're dealing with people who are either stubborn or just, lost in whatever sauce they are. Because you've been around for so long, David. CO2, supercritical. Like, it's always sucked. It has. It always, and it still does. But we watched our competitors just die. And they were just so stuck on it. This is the best. And when confronted with all the evidence and the facts that say this is why it's not the best, this is why it's a bad investment, this is why, whether or not you're a designer manufacturer of the equipment or you're a user of it, it never made mathematical sense. People were stuck. Mm-hmm. and it literally probably took, a pandemic to wake a lot of people up. This is going to be one of those things. It's, again, I'm joking, not joking about FDA kicking doors in. Is that what's going to take to wake people up, or do they want to get ahead of the issue?
Well, historically, it's always seemed to be in better favor of those that got ahead of the issue than tried playing catch up.
ProdigyUSA.com. We'll take you there.
Well, Marc, thank you very much for taking the time today. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or Prodigy Processing?
No, it'd be great to. We're actually revamping our website. We should have it up within about 3-4 days, and it's going to focus even basically cannabis industry and sort of the pharma thing and the sort of balancing those two together, which there's so much synergy. But there's a lot of information there, especially in our news and tip section about the opportunities that are going to be presented now, and maybe some steps that people may consider moving forward. So yeah, check it out, ProdigyUSA.com. And David, no, this has been great. I know we covered a lot and we didn't cover a lot, so I'd look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, I'd absolutely want to do it again. Well, but before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Marc Beginin, founder and CEO of Prodigy Processing Solutions, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. We will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.